It took me a little bit to do this video. Um, it's a very sad story, and the person who's letting me tell their story, thank you. I'm going to leave you guys some links in the description on who to talk to if you have been sexually abused as a child, if you are still being sexually abused as a child. Also, too, I'm going to be giving you screen recordings of what those websites look like and how to identify a predator on WikiHow. Thank you for your subscription, and please be aware of your surroundings. Be vigilant, and love yourselves and love other people.
Now, what I'm about to say is not going to be easy for me to say. And I hope that everyone will be patient with me as I try to recall what happened without trying to lose my composure. At least try to maintain some level of composure. People know my name. I don't feel the need to say who I am because realistically, I don't plan on doxing myself in a recording that I'm willing to allow to be uploaded because it needs to be said and the silence needs to be broken about it. People that know me have had it hinted at what happened to me when I was younger. But I think it's time I actually fully went into detail as to what was done, who did it, and how it all started. When I was 13 years old, I started being sexually groomed and abused by two female students who attended my middle school. One of the students was a tutor who was a couple of years older than me. The other was someone that was a grade level ahead of me but was still my same age. They were placed a grade level ahead because they were in advanced placement courses. I suffered greatly in math because I wasn't able to keep up with a lot of the fellow students when it came to class. So I decided to go in for tutoring, and there was this female student who was actually offering tutoring to students as well. This person would be paid roughly $7 to $8 an hour to tutor students, and apparently she'd had at least 2 or 3 other students who she was tutoring as well on alternating days of the week. Two of these students were females, and others of the students were male. I never got into contact with these 3 other students mainly because of the fact that if I brought up what happened to me, it would have just ended up blowing it wide open when it was going on. So I stayed quiet. The first time I was at this person's home being tutored, they pulled some things that I didn't think much of at the time, but now that I'm older and wiser, I realized that these things that this person was doing were essentially made to kind of get a feel. They were designed to kind of get a readout to see whether or not I'd be picking up what they were laying down. There were incidents where this person would enter the room either topless or missing all the bottom half of their clothing. I would notice, get flustered, immediately look away and just say what and ask what that's all about, or simply say to please put some clothes on because I was not really comfortable with what they were doing. Now, despite being a heterosexual, I still don't like the idea of having someone that I don't have any sort of like romantic attachment to being like that around me. because it puts me in a really awkward position. That's why I tend to try to really avoid a lot of like loose statements with complete strangers. That's why I always try to make sure that everyone is like given privacy when it comes to changing clothes, showering, things like that, unless it's someone that I'm actually in a relationship with, where I've actually built up that level of trust and intimacy and comfort with this person. After 4 or 5 visits, this person then invited their cousin, who was actually the other student who participated in the abuse. This person had the other person film them pinning me to the ground with their iPhone as they proceeded to try to remove the lower half of my clothing. I started to struggle. I started simply saying, hey, knock it off. This isn't funny. If this is a joke, it's a really bad joke. Knock it off. And what happened was they threatened to put it on the school's Facebook page and circulate a rumor that I was gay if I didn't go along with it, which me being called gay didn't really get to me. It's the fact that if it ended up on the school's Facebook page, then everyone and their mother would see it. Word would get around to my family about what was going on, and I was worried I'd be blamed for it. Because when a male is being sexually harassed or sexually assaulted, people don't treat it with the same degree of severity that it would if it's a young woman being sexually harassed or sexually assaulted. They also said that if I dared tell anyone about what was going on, that they would find a way to get my family locked in a really bad court battle, which could financially ruin them. Because both these people were families that had quite a bit of money in the community. These were people who had a lot of sway in the community. Their families owned a lot of land. Families owned a lot of resources. And because of that, they had a lot more sway over most people in the community in terms of the sheriff and other members of the community who relied on them heavily for income, who were also friends of that family and friends of their friends. So it was essentially like a giant small town circle jerk that could result in fucking me financially and fucking up my family financially if I ever tried really to step to them and try to challenge what they were doing. So I simply complied out of fear of what would happen to my family if I said anything. One of them would film the other as they would force me to initiate an oral sex with them, and vice versa. And the worst part is, like, people now, for example, there are people who will say that if a young man has someone going down on him, even if it's against his will, even if it's under duress, people trying to tell him that he should be proud of what he did or proud of what these people are doing to him, or he should feel like he's accomplishing something at his age. No, it shouldn't. Because speaking from personal experience, you don't know how the hell to feel about it. Because with societal expectations, you come to believe that this is something that you should be celebrating. Because people in your peer group would actually congratulate you for getting this to happen to you, regardless of whether or not it's of your own volition and under duress or not. And because of that, it made me just say, well, I must have deserved it. It must be my fault. I should like this because people my age who are doing this usually tend to enjoy it from what I hear. And it just kind of made me just shut down and just resign myself to what was going on. If I ever tried to speak out against it, if I ever tried to simply say that I wanted it to stop, they would hit me with a stick that they had in the house like a back scratcher, they would crack me across the back of the head with that, or like jab me in the back with it. They'd even gone to the point to where they'd actually lit cigarettes and put the cigarettes out on my forearms if I ever tried to say anything about what they were doing. They had also snapped several still photographs and several shorter videos on the iPhone and threatened to release those to the public if I ever spoke out or did anything at all that they disagreed with. And the worst part is these people went to school with me. They went to school with me. If I was acting any bit funny, they would immediately be able to turn whatever they did around on me. If I were to ever go to the school officials and say what's going on, all that would happen is they could use their gender and my gender as a way to reverse the roles. They could easily just say that I was the aggressor even if I wasn't. And that's another problem when it comes to how society tends to handle these types of things. Because society seems to have this standard set where if you happen to be a gender that's more likely to be the one offending as opposed to the one being offended on, it's a lot harder for you to be able to tell people what the fuck someone's been doing to you and speak out against it, because odds are it's going to be taken as either a joke, people are going to make light of it only because of the fact that you're a guy and someone is taking advantage of you, or they're just going to sit there and pretend that you should somehow like or enjoy what this person or people have been doing to you, despite the fact that you were a fucking kid. You were just barely entering your teenage years. Like, some of the years that should have been the most formative, that should have been some of the most energetic and enjoyable, became some of the worst 2 years of my life. Because what happened is I started withdrawing from my friends, I started withdrawing from my family, I started trying to distance myself from other people because I just wasn't sure who I could trust. And I was honestly afraid that if I was alone with a member of my family or one of my friends, like, everything that's been going on would just suddenly pour out and I'd just start telling everyone what the fuck people have been doing to me. And I couldn't risk it. I was afraid that my male friends would mock me, and I was afraid that my female friends would call me a fucking liar. So I just didn't say anything. The guilt of what these people were doing to me taped my own mouth shut and chained me down to the point to where I couldn't even struggle. I started going along not because I wanted to, but because I knew that there was no way out of it. Because it was either these people could say I was the one that started it and they could destroy my whole school career, or they could use it against, like, they could admit to it but then try to have some sort of like really long court battle, which could have drawn itself out for years and potentially cost my family far more money than they could afford. So it was either I ruined my own life and my family's life, no matter which way I go, or I just kind of knuckle under, grit and bear it, and just fucking hope that it's over soon. And unfortunately, I took the last of the two because it was the only option that seemed viable at the time. Even as an adult, nearly 13 years later, I still don't really know if there was a better option or not. I really don't believe that there was. I don't. It's not like I enjoy what happened to me. I most certainly didn't. But all things considered, there was no other option. It was either comply or have everything that your family worked so hard to do, and everything that you were trying so hard to do as just a 13-year-old boy, to want to try to do good in school, to try to make a good impression with your peers, and to have all that destroyed in one fell swoop if you make so much as one wrong statement around these people. The constant anxiety and stress that being around them caused caused me to be almost, I guess you could say, sporadic in how I acted in class. Now I still answered questions and things when called upon, but when it came to people trying to have conversations with me in class, I would either make an incredibly outlandish statement to try to like get it away from anything that might have made me uncomfortable, or I would just completely try to push what they were saying away and just kind of nudge it off because I was trying my hardest not to talk about anything at all that might relate to what was going on with me. Because I was afraid that if someone mentioned something even tangentially related, that I might just finally take the cork off that bottle and have everything that's been happening just pour out. So I went like above and beyond to try to avoid any type of conversation that didn't seem necessary. Because I felt like that avoiding that conversation would be a lot more safe than actually trying to have a conversation that might actually lead to me saying some things that could potentially be used to screw me over. About a month into the abuse, I just started abusing painkillers regularly. I started knocking a bunch of painkillers back each day when I got home from school or when I got back from being tutored. I would walk home because it was only a couple miles outside of town. So what happened is I would walk from after school, after walking to, and the whole time I'd be walking home, it would be the walk of shame the entire time. It felt like everyone in the world was fucking looking at me because of what I was made to do. Even if I knew for a fact the roads were empty and there was no one driving beside me. It felt like everyone in the fucking world had known what these people made me do and were staring at me and judging me. It felt like everyone was fucking calling me weak for succumbing to what these people wanted. So I just generally, I wouldn't necessarily say I became agoraphobic, but I definitely had like a lot more aversion than going outside, and I tended to only want to go somewhere if it was absolutely necessary. Like if someone needed me to go to the supermarket with them because they needed someone to like carry the heavier stuff, I would go only because of the fact that they needed the help. If people didn't really ask me to go, sometimes I would go to try to like force myself out of that mentality. To try to say, dude, calm the fuck down. Nobody else knows but you. And I'd managed to hold it together pretty fine for the most part, but sometimes when I got home, I would feel so fucking nauseous and frustrated with the situation that I would just have to just try to lay down and sleep off the frustration, but it would just cause me to have more insomnia episodes. It would cause me to have a harder time trying to wind down and relax. Because the whole night when I'm trying to sleep, I would be wondering whether or not people might have seen photographs. I might have seen videos of what these people did to me, even if these people obviously didn't even live in the community and they would have no way to get them. And now, even as an adult, I still have that little bit of insecurity about that. It's like whether or not someone could have seen this, or could have heard these things, or could have done these things. And that's the thing. That's what really caused me to have like a lot of difficulty when it came to working, when it came to maintaining a job, when it came to like socially interacting with people that I'm not familiar with. Is the fact that when it came to letting people in, I was a lot more hesitant afterwards. When it came to people that I knew for years, I knew I could trust them. But when it came to talking to strangers, especially women, for example, like if there was someone talking to me that's a woman, I would either just simply be as quiet as possible to the point where they felt like I didn't want to talk because I was just not sure who I could trust, or I would try to be as polite as possible, but also try to make the conversations as short as I could because I just legitimately didn't feel comfortable talking to women. And there still is some degree of discomfort there. It's not nearly as bad as it was, but it's still a thing that I'm still trying to work through. Like, the only reason it's so easy for me to talk to people like those who I associate with now is because I know that they wouldn't do anything to hurt me like that. But when it comes to a complete stranger who I've had like no real interactions with at all, it's increasingly difficult to try to maintain that level of calm cool collectedness as opposed to someone that I've known for a while. I attempted suicide twice, once when I was 14. I had attempted to hang myself in the woods, but I decided against it when I realized just what it would have done to my family, so I just decided to just say fuck it, threw the rope away, and then just never spoke about it to anyone. The note that I wrote, I made sure that I got it before anyone else found it, tore it up, and burned it to dispose of the evidence. Like, I didn't want people to worry about me because I just didn't want anyone to know. Because there's that fucking guilt involved that makes you feel like you somehow deserve what people are doing to you because you were weak enough to let them hurt you like that. Second time, I almost overdosed on pills until at the last minute I went to the bathroom and induced vomiting several seconds after doing it because I realized just how bad it would affect everyone else. And the worst part is, like, people in my family could have easily blamed themselves and never have known why. Like, what stopped me wasn't a matter of whether or not it would hurt me or whether or not it would be the end, because I really wasn't concerned with my own safety. I wasn't concerned with what would happen to me in the end. I was more concerned with how it would affect my family, how it would affect my friends, how it would affect people that actually did matter to me in my life. At the end of the day, these people were the ones that tethered me to reality, that tethered me to wanting to carry on, wanting to hold up, keep my head up despite what was going on with me. Around the time the abuse ended, it didn't end because these people voluntarily stopped. It ended because one of them transferred schools, and without any real desire to really carry it on, they essentially threw me away. As glad as I was to know that the abuse was going to stop, the fact is that this person that was still around held the images in the short video that she recorded over my head and straight up said, yeah, if you talk to anyone about this, if you publicly disclose this with my name, if you mention who's been doing this to you, this stuff's going to go on the Facebook page for the entire fucking school. And everyone's going to know that you're a weak little simp who got pushed around by a pair of girls. So I didn't say anything about it. This person eventually left the school as well, and pretty much everything just faded into obscurity. And then I started going to therapy afterwards, and only in therapy was I actually able to disclose what had happened to me. My therapist, who was a woman at the time, was someone that was significantly older than most therapists now. The therapist had actually told me that it was my fault for not standing up to these people, when I had already explained to them that trying to stand up to them would have only resulted in them fucking up my family's life and fucking up my life. And they could essentially walk away scot-free on account of their gender and the fact that everyone was a minor at the time. So I requested a transfer to a different therapist because I just didn't want to deal with a therapist who was going to talk down to me and tell me that what was going on with me was just a giant bullshit made-up story. Because of my gender, because of my orientation, they trying to suggest that I should have liked it or should have just accepted it and went along with it. The fact that we have people like Cranium and Andrew the Map saying that people like myself either don't matter because our experiences go against their narrative, or because they're just legitimately sick people who think it's okay to like victimize and hurt someone for their own amusement. These things don't make what you do okay. These things don't make anything that you say all right. And this is a message to the people who might be listening. If someone is hurting you, if someone is doing something to you, don't do what I did. Don't let these people silence you. Don't let them tape your mouth shut with the guilt or fear that what they're doing to you. Don't let these people control you like the way I let my abusers manipulate me. Now let's talk about the aftermath of what happened to me. After what happened to me, I ended up seeking out like a lot of self-destructive relationships. Now I wouldn't say self-destructive in the terms of like dysfunctional like there was no abuse or anything like that involved. But the problem is I would usually seek out relationships that were like doomed to fail because I was trying to force myself to get over my aversion to relationships. Like I was trying to force myself to get over my aversion towards having sexual contact with women or having or any type of romantic involvement with women. I was trying to force myself to get over that aversion because I believe that if I like run the gauntlet enough times, then I'll just start to develop a tolerance. Now, exposure therapy has been proven to work when it comes to dealing with people that have phobias. It's proven that like having like short interactions with things that they're usually afraid of, it tends to kind of minimize their fear of it. It's been proven to work in clinical psychology before. So there was some degree of sound logic in what I was trying to do to myself. But the problem is, as a result of trying to push myself through that dysfunctionality, what happened is I ended up losing some female friends, which, albeit the relationship ended, even though the relationship ending was for the best because the relationships didn't really start on a good foundation to begin with, because they, unfortunately on my part, a lot of these relationships were formed with some dishonesty because I was trying to essentially force myself to get over my problems by throwing myself into a situation where I'd have no choice but to get over my problems. But I realize now that that wasn't the way to do it. Because the worst part was when I did that, I ended up losing a couple friends because I was trying way too hard to like make myself get over my phobias. Now, eventually, I did get over the majority of it, but it took nearly 6 years to do it. It took me nearly 6 years in total to try to get over the level of distrust and fear I felt towards developing relationships with people because I actually ended up having to like let people in. And a lot of the times I didn't want to put my walls down because I was concerned that if I put the walls down, it would just open me up to being hurt again. But I'm glad I did in the end. I'm glad I managed to just kind of lower my defenses enough to try to let somebody in. Like, the only reason I ever really told Kate what happened to me was because of the fact that during an argument it kind of slipped out of my mouth. Because one time she asked me why sometimes it is I like zone out or I get kind of distant from her. Like, it's never been her personally. It's always been like that little fucking headspace that I end up getting into sometimes when I'll hear something or see something familiar. And it will just like immediately throw me back into that really fucked up point in my life that I'd just rather not repeat again. But that's not an indictment of her character. In fact, that's a testament to how patient she is with me. Because sometimes there are days where I'll just completely fucking zone out. Like I'll shut down at random because I'll be thrown right back into that kind of mentality that I was in when I was like trying to essentially push myself through the little funk that I was in, where I was trying to essentially force myself out of that mentality of not trusting anyone. That's why when people like Joseph Frankus and Andrew the Map say that it doesn't affect people, I have to strongly disagree. If I am to use myself as a personal anecdote, I can point out the fact that it really does greatly affect people because it causes you to like be hesitant when it comes to forming relationships because you're not sure who you can trust and what level of intimacy you can trust with them. Unfortunately, I ended up also forming an addiction to painkillers, which took me a few years to get clean. But I've been clean for over 10 years now. And it was all because I just decided to like fucking tighten up my bootstraps and say, fuck it. I'm not gonna let this fuck my life up like these people have, because then I'm letting them win. And I decided that I wasn't gonna let these fucking people win and mess up my life. A few years ago, I found out that one of them was actually arrested and they're currently serving a 25-year prison sentence for engaging in a sexual act with someone who they were babysitting who was 9 years old. The other one, I believe, is also currently serving a sentence for possession of methamphetamine and solicitation of a minor. So, needless to say, both these sad sacks of shit ended up fucking up their own lives, and I'm the one that's in a relationship, has a job, has friends. Out of the three of us, I'm the one that turned out more put together than the other two. And I'm not gonna lie, that feels fucking good. It feels good to know that those sad sacks of shit had their lives destroyed by their actions. And I get to sit here and just simply say exactly what the fuck they did without any real fear of the repercussions of what they're gonna do now. Because there's no way for them to do shit about it. And if these bitches ever find a way to hear this, I hope that you toil. I hope that, like, whatever the fuck you do, that it always comes back to sink and blow up in your fucking face your entire fucking lives. I hope that everything you do turns into a massive clusterfuck failure so that I can sit there and laugh at you and know in the note and understand and live with the knowledge that you guys fucked your own lives up. I get to sit here and laugh at that and look at you and simply say, I won. Because I'm not the one falling into the deepest pits of shit. You are. I hope this has been informative. I hope this maybe might give people some insight as to why the hell it is I hate these map motherfuckers so much. I want to thank Natasha Gabriel for giving me this platform. It was actually very difficult to try to muster up the courage to say what needed to be said. But I hope everyone can learn from this and appreciate that I'm actually being legit, that there's no type of bullshit or deception involved in this. I hope I am able to be helpful in some way with this. And that's the end of my story.